All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second cannabis webinar. My name is Kevin Collin. I'm the zoning administrator for the City of Sacramento, and I am joined today with Kirk Skierski, our senior planner and project lead. Before we get into the meeting, I'd like to first explain we are in a webinar format, obviously in Zoom, and what that means is that your video is off by default, so you won't be able to use your video camera. The chat is also disabled, and we'll be using the raise your hand function to speak when we get to that portion of our meeting today. There's a lot of information that is going to be covered today, and all of it is already online. You can reference the chat and pull up the project website if you'd like to revisit any of the content today. Have any additional follow-up questions, our contact info is going to be there. You can sign up to be notified of future meetings at that website as well. Of course, the benefit of this webinar will be we'll have ample time actually for back and forth given the number of attendees. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Kirk.
Okay. So what to expect with this webinar? I will start with a presentation, go over the materials, and following the presentation, we will open it up to a question and answer session. At 4 points during the presentation, we will have some survey questions for you to answer. If you have any questions during the presentation, you can use the Q&A tab, and Kevin will be monitoring those questions and help identify ones to respond to. And before I begin to share my screen and start the presentation, we have our first round of survey questions. Perfect.
Thank you, folks, for answering. All right, already jumping in there. We have some experience webinar folks. All right, more than half have answered. Thank you so much. Numbers keep going up. We're at 30 seconds in. If you could, we'll wrap it up here in just another 30 seconds or so. All right, getting some more responses. For about 66% of participants have responded. If anyone else would like to respond to the poll, please do so. I'll give just a few more seconds here, and we'll share out the results. All right, we're a minute and a half in, is to keep us on time. I'm going to end the poll and share out the results. So it looks like we've got folks who work in the industry, interested residents, and one neither of those. Thank you all for answering. Back to you, Kurt.
Well, we are excited for you to join us for a virtual webinar on the Title 17 Cannabis Amendments Project. We are currently in the community engagement phase of the project, and the purpose of today's webinar is to present staff's analysis and preliminary recommendations and gather feedback. This morning, we're going to focus on the comprehensive cannabis study and zoning amendments for all cannabis land uses. Cannabis consumption lounges will not be discussed during today's webinar. The Cannabis Consumption Lounge pilot program is a separate project but it will be affected by this project. So because of that, this project is going forward a little bit quicker than the consumption lounge pilot. So that pilot program for consumption lounges will have community engagement events similar to today. So stay tuned. Sign up for the email notification list because we will also use that list when we are providing notice for the consumption lounge pilot program when we get into that community engagement phase. So moving right along, to help set the stage for today's webinar, I'll briefly touch on how we got here, but the main focus will be on the 7 points of policy direction provided by the City Council. That policy direction is the starting point for the analysis and evaluation when we're considering potential code amendments. We'll have in-depth discussion of each policy point and the preliminary recommendations. And finally, I will conclude with a project timeline, and then we will go into an open question and answer period. So this project has had a long history, and I believe the key takeaway is that the City Council commissioned a comprehensive cannabis study that analyzed our cannabis program and zoning regulations, along with the evolution of the cannabis industry here in Sacramento. Following the completion of the study, there were a series of workshops or discussions held to gather input and present the findings of the study. This ultimately led to the City Council providing staff with 7 points of policy direction related to cannabis zoning regulations. It is important to highlight the comprehensive cannabis study as it plays an important role in evaluating council's direction and preparing preliminary recommendations. It provides in-depth analysis of the city's cannabis land uses, which helps fill in the puzzle of what we know about cannabis land uses and how they interact with other residential, commercial, and industrial uses. On the screen is a summary of the 7 points of policy direction provided by the City Council. Now, policy points 1, 2, and 4 work together in regulating where cannabis land uses can go. Because of this, I will be presenting the policy direction points out of order, starting with those to help paint a better picture of how the preliminary recommendations will come together. The first point of policy direction was to review cannabis business zoning. So think of this as the permitting process for cannabis land uses, which are cultivation, manufacturing, distribution, testing, and dispensaries. So does the permitting process make sense? What do we know from the comprehensive cannabis study, and what have we seen? Let's first identify what we know about the current permitting process, its purpose, and what cannabis businesses experience. Currently, most cannabis land uses require a conditional use permit. The purpose of a conditional use permit is to review land uses that are known to create impacts or are capable of causing special problems. Because of this, conditional use permits have the highest level of review. It's a discretionary review. It comes with the highest permitting fee and the longest processing time. And it is important to remember that the comprehensive cannabis study found that cannabis land uses do not create impacts or cause problems, do not result in increases in crime, and do not impact other residential, commercial, or industrial uses. When we look at what we have seen with the current conditional use permit process for cannabis land uses, past cannabis conditional use permit hearings, the public discourse is not focused on specific business location or specific business practices as intended by the conditional use permit process, and instead have focused on on topics unrelated to land use or zoning. The current conditional use permit process has rarely resulted in denial or specific or additional conditions of approval for cannabis conditional use permits. Largely, the conditions of approval are identical across cannabis land use applications when reviewing them. So dispensaries have similar have the same conditions of approval as other dispensaries, same with cultivation and manufacturing. So this slide shows different permitting options that we can consider and what those options would entail. All land uses in the city are subject to one of the following based on location or zoning district. By right uses are uses that are beneficial to the character and nature of the zoning district. No planning permit is required, but a business license is required to operate. Administrative permits are ministerial permits, and they are for uses that are compatible with a zoning district, but may have additional or special requirements that is verified through the administrative review process. As mentioned, these permits are ministerial. That means they are pass or fail. You either meet the standards and get your permit or you don't. And as previously mentioned, conditional use permits are a discretionary review intended for land uses that create problems or are capable of causing special impacts. With that, they come with the highest permitting fee and the longest processing time. So to frame staff's preliminary recommendation, this slide shows a table of existing permitting requirements for all cannabis land uses. As mentioned, most cannabis land uses currently require a discretionary permit or a conditional use permit. There are some limited exceptions for distribution and non-volatile manufacturing, subject to meeting certain criteria. So with that, let's take a look at the preliminary recommendation. We are recommending that all cannabis land uses be subject to a ministerial permit or an administrative permit in all instances. This would mean that new cannabis businesses or modifications to cannabis businesses could potentially need an administrative permit to move forward. And the reasoning for this recommendation is that the comprehensive cannabis study demonstrated that cannabis land uses do not cause problems or impacts. And by requiring an administrative permit, it aligns with the documented impacts or what we know about how cannabis land uses operate. Administrative permits still enable verification of compliance with our standards, along with the ability to add conditions of approval. Because it's a ministerial review process and you either meet the standards or you don't, it provides certainty for applicants that comply with the standard, and it significantly reduces the cost and the processing time for those applications. Now, before we move on, we have 3 survey questions to answer.
All right, just a moment. Thanks for your patience. All right, I'm hitting launch for the second poll. There are 3 questions in there. If you would, please, we would love to hear your feedback on those 3 questions. We'll give a little bit more time on this because there is more content there. Take your time in absorbing questions. Again, appreciate the feedback. All right, looks like a third of you have responded. Thank you. Increasing up to about half. All right, we're just past a minute and a half. Kurt, for your info. We'll give it about another 30 seconds just to keep us moving along. We're at 2 minutes. All right, got some more responses. Thank you very much. All right, we're at 2.5 minutes. Just over half of you responded. Thank you for your answers. I'm going to end the poll and share out the results for you all. It's like a pretty even split on the uniform standards versus project by project approach. So yeah, pretty similarly across a question about whether a public hearing should be required. And then finally, in terms of our attendees who participate in hearings, looks like we've got a broad mix of folks. All right, with that, Kirk, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, let's move on. The next policy direction was to consider additional zones for dispensaries, so storefront dispensaries and delivery-only dispensaries, and also to consider allowing storefront dispensaries in the RMX and 3C zones. First, I'm going to discuss storefront dispensaries, and then I will go into delivery-only dispensaries. So, starting with storefront dispensaries, what we know, let's take a look at a map of the current zoning districts that allow storefront dispensaries while I talk through what we know where about trends, where they locate, and what we're seeing in other retail considerations. So this map shows the current zoning districts that allow storefront dispensaries, which are heavy commercial and industrial zones. The commercial zones are shown in red hues, and the industrial zones are shown in purple hues. Now, looking at the current zoning districts that allow storefront dispensaries, industrial zones make up more than double the available land for dispensaries than commercial zones. This means that when a storefront dispensary is considering where to locate in Sacramento, there are more opportunities in industrial zones. Where are the city's industrial zones located? Well, Council Districts 2 and 6 have the most industrial zoning in the city, and they also have the most storefront dispensaries in the city. When staff was analyzing storefront dispensaries and existing storefronts, we noticed a trend in that the central city is highly desirable for dispensary owners. It makes up a small percentage of land zoned for storefront dispensaries, but it makes up approximately 30% of the city's storefront dispensaries. And so if we are considering additional zones to allow storefront dispensaries, let's take a look at the available zoning districts that could be considered. So this table shows available residential mixed use and commercial zoning districts that we can consider to allow storefront dispensaries. Generally categorizing storefront dispensaries as a retail type use provides direction in considering additional zones to allow storefront dispensaries, meaning that viewing storefront dispensaries as a retail use will help narrow down the focus of additional zones to consider, but still will require evaluation of the intent and character of those zones. Of the 6 available zoning districts to consider, 3 of the zones are more intended for residential and office uses. They actually have restrictions on retail uses. The other 3 zones support a mixture of retail and service commercial, including heavy commercial and manufacturing type uses, generally that are compatible with residential uses. So let's take a look at where RMX, C1, and C3 are located in the city and the characteristics of those zones. So RMX, C1, and C3 are mainly located in the central city in the south, but include areas evenly dispersed throughout the city. C3 is located entirely within the central city or council district 4 and makes up the city's economic and tourism core. RMX is primarily located in the central city or council district 4, but is also found in the south and north, typically along areas near existing transit. The C1 zone, it makes up a very small portion, but it's evenly dispersed throughout the city and generally integrated into residential neighborhoods. And when we look at all these zones and their characteristics, we see that they're located in commercial and tourism hubs with access to transit, integrated into residential areas and in close proximity to a mixture of uses, all ideal characteristics for retail uses. Because of this, staff is recommending to add the RMX, C1, and C3 zones to the zoning districts that allow storefront dispensaries. So let's take a look at a map that shows the current zones that allow storefront dispensaries plus RMX, C1, and C3. So as mentioned, this shows the current zones plus the staff's recommended zones. The primary change occurs in the central city. So the reasoning staff is recommending to add RMX, C1, and C3 is because it is a small but focused increase that would primarily be located in the central city and in areas near existing transit. The central city is an area desirable by storefront owners near commercial and residential uses and walkable. The addition of C1 being integrated into residential neighborhoods would provide for increased opportunities for customers to walk or bike. There would be minimal changes to areas with high concentration of dispensaries. And again, the comprehensive cannabis study found that dispensaries do not create problems or issues, are typically good neighbors, and integrate into a variety of retail environments, which is why staff is recommending to add RMX, C1, and C3. Before I go into the discussion related to additional zones for delivery-only dispensaries, we have 2 survey questions for you to answer. And while we have those up, I will include the recommendation for storefront dispensaries.
All right, thank you for those that are entering your responses. We've got 2 questions in the poll. All right, just approaching half of our attendees. About 30 seconds, 45 seconds into the poll. All right, thank you everyone who's responded. We're well over half at this point of the attendees who participated, about a minute into the poll. All right, if there are any last participants, now would be the time. If you would please put your entry into the poll. I'll click stop in just about 15 more seconds. All right, we're at 2 minutes. More than half of you replied. I'm going to click in the poll to enable the sharing of the results. Again, pretty across the board spread there in terms of those supporting and or not. Those additional zoning districts that Kirk's mentioned. And if not, yes, are there any other zones that you would support? So it looks like the majority of you have answered no. But also some other responses in there too for different zoning districts. All right, Kurt, back to you. You're muted.
Apologies. Thank you, Kevin. At this time, we are not recommending any additional zones for delivery-only dispensaries. The majority of delivery-only dispensaries are located in industrial zones, which appear to be better suited for their business operational needs. Delivery-only dispensaries are currently allowed in general industrial and in heavy industrial zones. With that being said, delivery-only businesses would benefit from the other preliminary recommendations that are being presented today. The next policy direction we're going to discuss was to consider limiting sensitive uses to schools, youth-oriented facilities, substance abuse rehabilitation centers, faith-based institutions, and neighborhood and community parks. So let's start with what is a sensitive use, what do they mean for dispensaries, and what are the current implications of our sensitive use requirements. From a high level, the purpose of a sensitive use buffer is to provide a physical separation between certain uses and, in this case, dispensaries. Generally, sensitive uses can be categorized as incompatible uses or uses that would be impacted. It can include protection for impressionable or vulnerable populations. And it can also include uses of community value. In regards to cannabis land uses and sensitive use buffers, there hasn't been any studies or data to suggest what is a sensitive use. Because of this, sensitive use requirements vary largely across other jurisdictions in California with many different approaches. Some jurisdictions follow the state's model and add additional uses of community value, such as parks and playgrounds. And the next slide will show a map of all the current sensitive uses staff was able to verify. All right. The areas in white are located outside of a sensitive use buffer. However, it is important to keep in mind that not all areas in white are zoned to allow for dispensaries. Looking at our current sensitive use requirements, we have 9 sensitive uses applicable to dispensaries. This results in 92% of the property being zoned for dispensaries being within 600 feet of at least one sensitive use. We currently allow dispensaries to locate within sensitive use buffers with Planning and Design Commission approval. And as a result, 82% of our current storefront dispensaries have been operating within at least one sensitive use. Okay, here is a table of the current sensitive uses separated by cannabis land use. Right now, we are going to focus on dispensaries. So on the screen, you'll see dispensary sensitive uses within the red box. Again, dispensaries must maintain a 600-foot buffer from these uses. However, the Planning and Design Commission does have the authority to reduce or waive the sensitive use buffers. When we were looking and analyzing our current sensitive uses, we noticed a trend towards youth and public and institutional uses. Based on this trend and the findings from the comprehensive cannabis study, staff approached sensitive use recommendations in a way to redefine sensitive uses to, one, capture impressionable and vulnerable populations, two, to capture public or institutional uses that have community amenities and programs supported by public investment, and three, areas where it is more likely to have a mix of the general public of all ages. And to do it in a way that would be clear and concise, that would be easily identified by everyone. And so that was how we tried to approach the recommendations. Now, the next slide will show the preliminary recommendations related to sensitive use buffers for dispensaries. And let's take a look at that while I go into the recommendations a little bit further. So, with staff's recommendations related to sensitive use buffers, we are first recommending to maintain the 600-foot buffer requirement. However, we are recommending to remove the ability to locate within a sensitive use buffer like you can today. So today, dispensaries have the ability to locate near parks, youth-oriented facilities, faith-based institution with Planning and Design Commission approval. So our recommendation is removing that ability. These buffers, the sensitive uses would be mandatory and you have to comply with the 600-foot buffer. So we are not recommending any changes to schools or substance abuse rehabilitation centers. While the City Council's direction was to include neighborhood and community parks, staff is also recommending to include regional parks because these represent the city's largest parks with increased youth and community amenities. These parks typically include community centers, amusement parks, zoos, sports fields, things of that nature. Council's direction included youth-oriented facilities. However, staff is recommending to redefine youth-oriented facilities as community centers and libraries. It would provide a clearer definition. These uses are easily identifiable, and they include community and youth amenities and programs. And the focus would be to include areas of public and nonprofit in the sense that there are some private businesses that may be classified as a youth-oriented facility, such as a Chuck E. Cheese. And when we look at those private establishments, they generally include the sale or service of alcohol. So the idea was to focus on public or nonprofit areas in which you would not have the ability to serve or be around alcohol. Let's see here. Now, okay. Council's direction also included considering faith-based institutions as a sensitive use. When we look at faith-based institutions and existing dispensaries, almost half of our existing dispensaries are within 600 feet of a faith-based institution. We have not seen or been alerted of any conflicts between these two land uses. There hasn't been any instances of faith-based institutions opposing dispensary proposals during past conditional use permit hearings. Because of this, staff has recommended not to include faith-based institutions as a sensitive use. The preliminary recommendations related to dispensary sensitive uses would reduce the number of properties currently within a sensitive use buffer by 50%. But dispensaries would no longer be able to locate within a sensitive use. Again, today a dispensary can go next to a park or a youth-oriented facility or a faith-based institution. The recommendation would be to have hard line sensitive use buffers. You cannot go within those within 600 feet. All right, so this map shows all of the recommended sensitive uses. If you can remember the map of the current sensitive uses, you'll notice that it is a big change. But again, the recommendation would clarify and make it easy to verify sensitive uses while providing a physical separation from dispensaries and youth and public uses of community value. Again, the recommendation would also remove the ability for dispensaries to locate within a sensitive use buffer like they can now. With that, we have 3 survey questions for you to answer.
All right, I think this is the last one. Yeah, we'll give there's 2 questions here. Locating cannabis businesses. If you would, we'd love to get your feedback. It's a lot of info to take in there. We'll give it ample time for y'all to respond. All right, I'm getting about a third of our attendees have participated. Going up, we have more than just about half. We're a minute into our 4th and final poll. Thank you for everyone who has responded. Appreciate the feedback. All right, even more. This is a popular one. A minute and a half. It's like 3/4 have responded. Thank you much. We'll give it just about 30 more seconds if you could. Love your feedback on these 2 questions. Right, final call. Couple last minute entries. Thank you. We're at 2 minutes. All right, Kirk, at this point, I'm gonna end the poll and hand it, I'll share the results out. It's like there is an overwhelming majority of folks who do think cannabis dispensaries should be physically separated from other land uses. And appreciate the feedback on which ones you consider to be sensitive. All right, with that, Kirk, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay. We will finish with sensitive uses as it relates to cannabis production. So that is cultivation, manufacturing, and distribution. Currently, sensitive uses for cannabis production include schools and neighborhood and community parks. The preliminary recommendation is to remove neighborhood and community parks as a sensitive use. This is because there are minimal instances of production uses being near parks. Only 4 out of 243 businesses, or approximately 1.6%. When you look at cannabis production uses, when you look at cannabis production and the zones they locate, which is predominantly industrial zones are typically not located near parks, which is likely why there's minimal instances. In addition, when you look at cannabis production uses, all activities occur within a building or a secured area. They're not open to the public. There are no retail sales. And you wouldn't necessarily know the difference between a cannabis production use and an adjacent industrial use from the public right-of-way. Okay, the next policy direction point was to consider the suitability of mixed light cannabis uses. Mixed light cannabis uses are cultivation sites that typically have a translucent roof. And the cannabis cultivation sector is the city's largest cannabis business sector. In the past, we have heard concerns related to light pollution, odor, and building reuse or adaptation. So let's take a look at mixed light facilities here in the city of Sacramento. In the past 8 years, we have seen 2 applications for mixed light facilities. Of the 2, only 1 facility has been constructed and is currently in operation. The other facility was never constructed and the permit has since expired. So staff's recommendation is to not make any zoning amendments at this time. It would maintain the status quo. That would mean that mixed light facilities may be allowed subject to site plan and design review approval. The reasoning for this, again, is there are minimal instances of mixed light facilities here in the city, only 1 out of 127 cultivation sites. We have actually seen a recent slowdown in cultivation applications. In the past year, we have not seen 1 new cultivation site application. We have processed 1 application to add 7,000 square feet to an existing cultivation site. When we looked at mixed light facilities, there were research that showed that those types of facilities could be adapted for traditional agricultural uses and that there weren't necessarily any issues related to light pollution, odor, or security. The next policy direction point was to consider removing cannabis distribution from the current uses subject to a district-based square footage cap. And so in 2018, the city saw a rush of conditional use applications specifically for cultivation. it was informally titled the Green Wave. And the Southeast Industrial area of the city actually had 116 of 213 applications. And that resulted in approximately 2.8 million square feet of approved cultivation floor area. So when I say approved, it means that that floor area was entitled. It still has to go through a process to get a building permit and be constructed, and then a business operating permit. At the time in 2018, cultivation was the primary concern. There were minimal manufacturing or distribution conditional use permits in 2018. So staff's recommendation is to exclude distribution from the floor area cap. The reasoning for that is that cultivation was the primary driver. And as I previously discussed, we have seen a slowdown in cultivation applications. Staff has also gone through an audit of the floor area cap. And as of August of this year, there is approximately 1.9 million square feet of entitled floor area. This means that there is approximately 580,000 square feet available for cultivation or distribution. Lastly, another reason for the recommendation was that the comprehensive cannabis study suggested that the city was likely to see a decrease in cannabis cultivation, as other areas throughout the state of California were better suited for cultivation needs, in that they allowed outdoor cultivation, they had cheaper land and utility costs, and access to major thoroughfares. Okay, the next policy direction point was to consider additional zones for non-volatile manufacturing. This direction largely stemmed from the comprehensive cannabis study, in that the study found that the manufacturing business sector had the highest growth potential. It was essentially integrated into all other cannabis business sectors and plays a significant role. And so the comprehensive cannabis study essentially asked the city, is our current zoning regulations and the allowed zones enough to support potential growth in this sector? When we look at cannabis manufacturing, it's currently allowed in all of our industrial zones, plus our general and heavy commercial zones. A big problem, however, is that non-volatile extraction requires a conditional use permit. So our recommendation as it relates to non-volatile manufacturing is not to add any additional zones. And that is because it is currently allowed in all of our industrial zones. If we were to consider any additional zones at this time, they would be either residential mixed use or commercial zones. Those zones aren't necessarily conducive or supportive of manufacturing activities. Most of the vast majority of cannabis manufacturing currently is located in industrial zones. Those zones are better suited for their business needs. But the non-volatile manufacturing businesses would benefit from the recommendation to change from a conditional use permit to an administrative permit for non-volatile extraction. Okay, I believe this is the last policy direction point, and it was to consider zoning and a permit type for cannabis research and development. I would like to clarify that cannabis research and development are businesses that are primarily engaged in research. Think of laboratory settings. The cannabis products that are studied at R&D facilities are not available for retail sale. They are only there to be studied, and that is it. So this policy direction again stemmed from the comprehensive cannabis study. With cannabis manufacturing having such high potential for growth, the evolution of cannabis products that we have seen on the market today for retail sale, and the growth in popularity in products like solvents, topicals, and edibles. The comprehensive cannabis study essentially again asked the city are our zoning regulations sufficient? Do we have regulations to support potential growth in the cannabis R&D sector? Some issues behind cannabis research and development is that there isn't a state license for cannabis research and development. And because of that, there's no uniform or common definition. We could not find any other jurisdiction in California that includes cannabis research and development as a land use type. And so with that, our recommendation is to amend the cannabis testing definition to include cannabis research and development activities. The reasoning for that is cannabis testing appears to be the best business sector to expand into research and development. Those cannabis testing has a low regulatory barrier. And lastly, what we are currently seeing with the state of California is that the state is leveraging our public college system. They're providing exclusive grant funding to colleges for cannabis research and development activities. And because of this, it's possible that the private market demand for cannabis research and development businesses may be a little bit slower to catch up. Okay, wrapping up the presentation. We are currently in the community engagement phase. We are wrapping this up and begin to prepare a draft ordinance that takes into consideration all of the past meetings we've had, the input we've received, and our hope is to begin the public review process of that draft ordinance in November. So we will provide notice of potential upcoming meetings through the email notification list. And if you're wondering where that is, it is located on the project website. Kevin put a link in the chat at the beginning of this presentation to the project website. But again, it has very comprehensive information, everything you've seen today or at past meetings, staff's analysis, it's all located on this website along with the email notification sign up. So encourage you to take a look and join the email notification sign up. And with that, it concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Kirk. All right, we'll move into our open discussion. We have some time for Q&A. If you just have comments, we'd love to hear it. There are a few questions and comments entered into the Q&A that I'll get to in a moment. So it looks like some of you are familiar with the raise your hand function in Zoom. That's great. If you're on a desktop computer, you're going to look for the hand icon, press that, and it tells me you'd like to speak. We'll take them, those in the order at which the hand is raised. We've got looks like we got 22 attendees, so we should have ample time to have a robust discussion. So if you want to talk more, if you think of something after you've spoken, please raise your hand again, and we'll accommodate as much as we can within the time we have today. If you're on a mobile phone, look for the More tab or three dots in the corner on the Zoom app. I do not see any call-in users, so I will skip those instructions. And I think, Kirk, maybe one of the questions, actually the very first question that came in at the beginning of the presentation, I'd like to respond to concerns the elimination of the conditional use permit and a desire to retain that, to voice opinions about sensitive uses, and to have a voice in that process. I think if you've gathered from Kirk's presentation that sensitive use separation requirements, buffers have not been firm under the current regulations. And it seems to be a very important topic for the community overall for different reasons. What we're attempting to do with this process, as informed by the study, is to bring certainty and predictability into the regulatory environment for where businesses can locate, for business owners, and for community members. So we're very much wanting the robust debate to happen now to help us set standards that we can all, maybe not all of us, but most of us can agree to. At minimum, the city council by majority vote will decide what is the desire of the city as a whole. And we think that this is the point in time to do that, and that repeating a proxy policy debate project by project, which history has shown is bearing out, is not necessarily benefiting the community or business owners. And so we'd like to improve our standards, hopefully to better align with what we know this business does to the community, and move on from there. So I hope that answers your question, Justin. If not, raise your hand. There are now no hands raised. Thank you, Shara. I see your hand raised. I'm going to click allow to talk. Should get a prompt on your end. Shara, your microphone is muted. If you can unmute, we'll be able to hear you. Oh, I see your hand's gone down. If you see a little microphone icon, if you press that on your desktop computer or on your mobile phone, I cannot do it for you. Unfortunately, you do need to unmute your own microphone. Okay, well, still seeing you as muted. All right, I've clicked ask to unmute again. Hopefully you see a prompt. Can click the microphone icon, we'll be able to hear you. All right, Shara, I'm gonna move on to the next speaker. Hopefully you can resolve your technical issue. And when you do, if you could raise your hand, we'll give it another try. Trevor, I see your hand raised. Thank you. I've clicked allow to talk.
Hello.
Yes.
Good
Can you
morning.
hear me?
We can.
Hi. Sorry, I'm using a friend's Zoom. I don't have Zoom. But I wanted to come on here. I really appreciate the presentation and the conversation. I think that there's a lot of good information here. But I had a couple of questions. I think the first one being, what prompted the conversation? Why is it that we're talking about changing sensitive uses? And I missed the first part of the presentation, but I guess I'm just wanting to know what the motive is.
Yeah, that was at the very beginning. It's a good question. There's a very specific reason, and that is the city has had cannabis regulations for a number of years, and the council decided that it would be a good idea to study what's going on with the industry and how is our regulatory environment addressing the industry today. So there is a comprehensive study that's linked on the project website that you can find in the chat. I will post it again. So all of the I think the common themes that we notice in the land use permit realm about fears about property value depreciation, about increases in crime that would typically come up in a public hearing, that study addresses with factual and objective information what we have found with actual operating businesses, that there is no,
Yeah.
so that's we're using that info to inform new regulations.
And then what is it that prompted, because I understand we're changing, or you guys are interested in changing the sensitive uses. And for me, so I'm an aunt, my family can't stop having babies. So there's a bunch of us around. And so when I see things like parks, I guess being a little bit more specific types of parks that are going to have, or you guys are, saying we should remove the 600-foot buffer for that. Or when I see child-oriented facilities, when I think about daycares and when I think about Chuck E. Cheese and stuff like that, I think it's a bit concerning to think about dispensaries potentially moving into that area just because maybe we're not seeing that there's a crime association. But when I think about it, it's like when I drive by a dispensary, I'm always seeing like armed guards, high levels of traffic. I imagine that there's a bunch of intoxicated people. So I'm wondering why, I guess, places where children surround themselves are a few of the things that are getting eliminated off of that topic.
Yeah, we're working in the opposite direction. That what currently there are different uses which we characterize as frequented by youth. You have a 600-foot radius that is a sensitive youth buffer, but more than half of our businesses that are cannabis have located within that distance through a discretionary permit process. We're seeking to reform that to be a mandatory, a required separation from what we're focusing on is youth, impressionable youth, facilities that are parks that have a public investment where you can play, you can recreate, a library where they are designed for the community and youth in particular, or community centers. So we're seeking to get greater clarity to have them physically be separate from one another, and at the same time acknowledging that this is a very culturally value-driven discussion. What one person considers to be sensitive may not be the same as the other. The youth are a common theme. We've heard from folks who've lived next door to dispensaries that they are the best neighbors that they could have imagined. They kept it clean. So I think we're trying to find the balance is what is the right mix. If you have any ideas or suggestions, we're here to listen.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think the motive was super important for me. So I just was curious to know why certain things are being maybe, I guess, suggested to be taken off. So I followed the conversation on Title 17 last week. And so I was looking at one particular slide. It was like yellow and blue. And then it crossed out, or it was recommending to cross out certain parks off of sensitive uses, if I'm not mistaken, and then also the child-oriented facilities. So I guess I was just seeking clarity on how, of that list, why those things were, I guess, picked. And so just to be clear, just to be clear, I'm in opposition of it. I definitely think I like the way that things are, but I'm also a type of person that's like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, so that's kind of where I'm coming from. Not that I'm not open to change, but I guess I was just curious why it became a hot topic all of a sudden, and why the places that, we're talking about youth surrounding are the ones that were primarily getting crossed off. So, yeah, I would just suggest keeping things the same. So I appreciate the time, but I just wanted to at least voice that, and then hopefully make sure I was on the right track with how I was thinking about what you guys are proposing and stuff like that. So
Great.
I won't take any more time, but I do appreciate it.
Thank you. We appreciate your time and participation. It's very much valued and appreciated. Thanks for joining. We'll move on to Carla is our next hand raised.
Hi, how are you guys?
We're well. Good morning.
Good morning. I have a couple questions and a couple comments. And I just wanted to piggyback off of what the last lady is saying. I have the same concerns. I think a lot of us do. So the study that you guys are relying on, I think every time you're needing something, just in my opinion, it's not an attack. It's just every time that you guys have given a response is like, well, the study said this, well, the study said that. You guys are relying heavily on this study. I took a look at it. It's a 237-page document. I didn't get to read all of it. There are some things in there that aren't included in your guys' slideshow. I just like to point out that the data is from 2021 and we're 90 days away from 2025. So I think the data is outdated. It was completed in 2022. So I think that in order for us to find what you're saying to be factual, we need an updated study, or the city needs to do an updated study because, as we know, a single study is insufficient for research because it can be easily influenced. There could be bias associated to it, circumstances, and then you need something that has multiple studies, not just one study. You need a diverse of methodologies so that you can incorporate patterns. So I think that would be like my number one concern, is that you're relying on this study. The data is old, almost 4 years old, and you need more than one study. That's just a comment I would like to make. And then there was, I had a question for Kurt. Kurt, while you were talking, you said that rarely has dispensary license not been approved. And so I was just wondering, what are some reasons for a denial, or what are some reasons why dispensaries wouldn't be approved, or why they've been denied in the past, do you know?
Kevin, I believe you might have better insight. I think there's only been one.
Do you know
And
the
I-
reason why it was denied?
And I don't know.
Yeah, well, so Carly, here's the challenge. I can tell you what staff would perceive in terms of its analysis and recommendation. There are one of two options. If you're a cannabis dispensary and you want to ask for a permit, if you meet the buffer requirements, if you're 600 feet or more from a sensitive use, you would come to a director hearing where the zoning administrator would be the review authority. There is no public comment at those meetings. There's no controversy, and those are virtually all approved with standard conditions of approval. If you're closer than 600 feet to a park, a youth-oriented facility, you go to the Planning and Design Commission. So there's about a dozen individuals that sit on that commission, and you'll find a diverse set of opinions as a result. And the example that Kirk's citing was recommended for approval by staff, but you get a room full of folks who feel very passionately about, I think, about cannabis and perceptions about what the effects of the land use activity would be. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago, fears about crime being raised, that their property values will be depreciated. That those are the themes that have come up. And I can just tell you that the record of permit decisions shows that more, overwhelmingly, almost all permits are approved, which feeds into our thinking about what are we debating at a public hearing every time? Can we instead set the community standard at a bar that the council, agrees best represents all of our values? And I think have the debate now, and rather than having businesses be subjected to a very risky, time-consuming process, and also stirring up a lot of debate about things that overwhelmingly go in one direction. Does that help you understand?
What do you mean overwhelming in one direction? Like it favors cannabis, or it favors
the business
children?
Overwhelming the permits are approved.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I just also wanted to mention too, I know that you said one of the excuses that you said about one of the reasons that you gave, I don't want to say excuse, but you're saying property values haven't gone down based on this study. Again, the data is old. If you guys would like, and I would be more than happy to, I can share with you the studies that I found that are more recent in 2023 that indicate property values have gone down, not just a California study, but other state studies. I'll send you multiple because, again, we don't want biased information. I mean, we can go and look at who funded the study that you're talking about, and it's the city, right? Or it's a cannabis related organization, if I'm not mistaken. So my big thing is, if you guys are going to rely on this study, let's have updated information, because I think a lot has changed since 2021, especially going into 2024. And then the other thing about changing definition of parks, I think that only favors a dispensary, because I mean, you can change the definition all you want, but in my opinion, I think we know what it means. If you're changing the definition of a park, does it give dispensaries more area, or does it give dispensaries less area? And it seems like changing the definitions to get the result or the outcome that favors dispensaries is seeing what's going on, in my opinion. And then I just wanted to mention, I was there all night last Thursday. I'm sure you guys saw me with my kid. And Kurt, you said something that I think is factually incorrect. You mentioned that there was no pushback from faith-based institutions, and we both know that there was a pastor there who opposed this type of zoning next to faith-based institutions and churches along with his church. And so I just think it's dishonest to say that there was no pushback. And other than that, I mean, you guys already know where I stand. I don't think sensitive usage should be changed. We shouldn't be changing definitions to suit a certain narrative. And I think updated data and information is required if that's what you guys are going to be relying on, and there needs to be more than one source. And I appreciate what you guys are doing, and I will email you hopefully later today and send you those current studies about property values going down and communities not having a good taste in their mouth with these dispensaries. And again, to piggyback on what the other lady said before me, I don't know what the rush is. I don't know what's changed or why this is necessary. I don't see why flooding Sacramento with more drugs is a good thing, because honestly, that's what we're doing. If we have 20 or 30 dispensaries, why do we need to go to 90 dispensaries? And then I know that there's a lot of this equity license being issued. And so in my opinion, those equity licenses are given primarily to people of color. And if you look at the statistics associated to smoking and cannabis use, they affect people of color. Black women who are pregnant have had cannabis in their system has gone up. There's all kinds of smoking related issues that happen with the Black community that are being ignored from this cannabis increase. And that's just the gist of my comment. I'm done, and I do appreciate your guys' time. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Carla. Appreciate your time again.
Thank you.
Participating in this
Yes.
conversation. Thank
Hey,
you.
hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
The last two comments have made or raised the redefining of parks.
Mhm.
And I think it would be a good time to clarify how the city classifies parkland and what we're actually changing, in that I think a lot of people are hearing the parks and they're thinking of playgrounds, your typical park, when what you think about, but not some of our classifications like open space or natural habitat areas. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, I think what comes to mind for me, Kirk, is that if folks are interested in understanding what on a map that looks like, that they can go to the project website under the sensitive uses, a policy direction point, and find a map that shows those parks.
Okay.
And so there's a lot of jargon, I think, that you're trying to filter and understand what does that mean. So I wanted to point out geographically that those are mapped. They're derived from the city's park plan. That's the new 2040 plan that was just approved by council. Regional, community, and neighborhood parks are different categories, and they're think of them as large, medium, and small. But it would really encourage folks to go look at that. We're not intending to open up land adjacent to parks for cannabis businesses. You can be next door to a park today, and you're with a dispensary if the Planning and Design Commission says yes. Our proposal is to say no. You have to be 600 feet from those parks, I think, is another way to think of it. Also, just to clarify for the audience, comment from the last speaker about number of dispensaries. Separate from zoning, there are business regulations that set a maximum number of dispensaries in the whole city, a total of no more than 40. There are less than 40 in operation today that have a business license to operate. So if you're looking at a map and thinking how many hundreds of dispensaries can the city have, the answer is no. There can be no more than 40 today. So I just want to clarify that. I see a couple more hands. Thanks, folks, for sticking around and engaging. Paris, I am clicking allow to talk.
Yeah, hi. Well, my name is Paris Bostic. I recently moved into the Sacramento area a few years ago, and I heard my initial comment I was prepared to make has changed a little bit due to all of the information that I've heard from the last two ladies that spoke. And I'm honestly, I consume cannabis, but I heard your comment about, you know, the neighbors in the neighborhood said that this was some of the best neighbors that they had. I mean, I it's something that I feel like I want to kind of believe is true, but I don't know how or who in their right mind with kids would be okay with having a cannabis club down the street from their house. That would irk my nerves for every day my kid walking outside or playing outside and it's a cannabis club here. You know, that's just something that I just truly can't believe. Second, as far as churches, my mom is an evangelist. You know, my grandfather was heavy in church, so it's like, you know, being in a setting where you know, praising God and you come outside and you staring at the cannabis, like it's even the danger aspect. I hear a lot of things about cannabis clubs getting broken into or places where they farm or anything that has to do with cannabis. My brother used to drive for a cannabis business and was in multiple occasions almost robbed. So it's like it is a big fear factor when it comes to cannabis, and it's unfortunate, but it just the facts are it is what it is. It's a dangerous business, unfortunately, and putting that danger in places by parks or like you said, there's a difference with parks, but even still, you know, parks, schools, playgrounds, churches is like unnecessary danger just added to the already danger that we go through every day. And I don't see the reason for it. I mean, if it's so much land, they building apartments everywhere. They could build, you know, they could find somewhere else to build this stuff. Why is it even an option? Why is it even being spoken on to build these things even 600 feet away? 600 feet, if you really think about it, is not really that far. But Sacramento is huge. Why not build somewhere else? I know it's money involved. I know everything got to do with money. You want to put it in places where money is flowing. That makes sense, but not in the point of you got to think about more than the financial gain. That's all I want to say. I mean, it's a lot more, but I know as people have been getting on here taking a lot of time. I don't want to really be one of those, but I don't agree with, and like the other lady said too, like what's the rush? Like what is it? Is it something that makes people think like, okay, well, what's the bigger play? Like what's really going on here where you gotta try to push all these things into one little itty bitty time frame? Like, is there an agenda? I mean, is that something that y'all are at liberty to say? Is it something that you have to do right now? Is it something that has to be done within the next year? Is it a time limit on when you have to get these things done? Or can you really just take time to see what the real people actually think?
Paris, we're doing it now. Thank you for your comments. It is I think in the view of many at City Hall, including elected and appointed officials, this is behind schedule. We're not rushing it by any means.
Okay.
It's been over 2 years since we gave a presentation to the Planning and Design Commission when the study was just released. We're here to hear all the voices, and I encourage you to sign up and continue to participate as we move this debate further along the process. We're following the council's direction.
Yeah.
So we're following our direct, we have instructions, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And so
is there one last question? I'm sorry. Is there a limit? Have you, in your opinion, is it not many people voicing these opinions?
I'm not
What's
sure
the opinions of the opposing? Is it people that oppose, but nobody's really speaking up for the opposition, or is it, and then it kind of just leaves it to where it's at, or?
Well, I like to think that this conversation is informed by opinions and feelings, emotions, but it's also informed by data
Yeah.
and laws, and so I think it's a very complex question. And like I mentioned earlier, the value aspect of this is just, it's a political question. So I don't like to think of it as, do we do a good enough job if we've got enough opposition, or do we have enough support? I think we're doing the process. We're trying to be as inclusive as we can to have venues like this and get people to come out and publicize that. So, if you have friends, family, you want to encourage them to participate, either in a meeting or reach out to us individually. We're here for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks.
No, thank you. We're here for you. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right. Let's see. I mispronounced your name. I apologize, Chanel or Channel. I think I probably didn't say that right, but I'm unmuted.
It's okay. It's Chanel.
Thank you.
Chanel. Yes, I really didn't have a question. I only just had a comment because I see the comment section is disabled.
Mhm.
So I just really wanted to just speak my piece. I'm a resident here in Sacramento, and I also own and operate a daycare. And so I'm just really all about the children. And I see the way this world is going, and what it's geared to is to affect the well-being of our children. If it's not from certain communities that I won't speak of because I don't want to offend anyone, certain communities, here we go with the cannabis here. And I just feel like if this is something, I have done my research and I do know cannabis can help, cannabis can heal, but I feel it's something we should probably leave to the doctors, to those certain people to be able to go and get these healing products. I don't feel that it's something that should be introduced to our children. Again, like everyone else spoke of, the 600-foot buffer is not enough for me. Move it over there to where you have all these people who have all this money and have all these different things. Move it over there to where they are. Don't move it here in the inner cities close to the children where they go to school, where there's businesses, where they have to walk and where they have to frequent. Why not open community outreach programs? Why not open certain trades to where kids can actually go like they had in schools and they removed? Why we can't open those things for kids to be able to get efficient or build some type of skill? Why is everything focused on something that has been proven to be slightly detrimental in certain cases, right? So I just feel that we could put the energy towards somewhere else. I'm an advocate for the kids. I really don't think this is an awesome idea. Back in the day, we had DARE. Don't you dare use drugs. And now we're like, hey, we don't want you to use them, but you can see them every day, right? So I just think that it's something we should all really band together. I'm definitely opposed to having cannabis or dispensaries anywhere near our children. Like I said, move them somewhere else. And if we move them closer to people who are possibly in opposition or don't want to see it around their land or their buildings, maybe we'll get a little more people interested in saying, hey, this is not something that we want. So I'm opposed to it. I'm not really happy about it. Of course, I'm going to continue to follow, but I just wanted to make a comment. It's really, the children are the future, and I don't think this is the proper way to introduce anything to them. So that's just my comment.
Thank you.
And thank you for your time. I appreciate
Hey,
it.
no, you're very welcome. Appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's see. I see 4 more hands raised. Angel, I clicked the button.
Hello?
Hi.
I can't hear.
We can hear.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Hello?
Turn your volume up.
Hold on.
We can hear you, Angel.
Maybe it connected to
I can't hear
earbuds.
you.
Yep. All right, we'll try that. Angel R has departed, I believe. We'll try that again. They return. Shannon, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Kevin. Hi, Kirk. How are you guys doing today?
Good, thank you
Good.
for joining.
Awesome. I'd like to thank you both for hosting this webinar. I have more of a comment to say as well. As someone who has been in this fight from the beginning, I know this isn't rushed. It has been years in the making. So thank you for being diligent and us getting some traction on this. I too am one who works with kids. I know that if we don't do this in a way where it can be where it is allocated and done professionally and legally, the illicit market is going to continue to take over. It's really important to teach your children, if that's something that you don't want them around, you know, it all starts in the home, but to try and stop something from going up, I think that 600 feet is more than enough space. I think that this fight has been a long time coming, and it's really unfair, and everyone should really do the research into this plant and do the research into how the city has been conducting this for years. Then they would know that this is something that has been a long time coming. And again, I just appreciate the work that you guys are doing, and I hope that everyone can get on board and see the positive things that cannabis brought to the community. And also the revenue is definitely bigger than money, but you're not going to stop it. This is evolution. And that's pretty much it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I appreciate your time today. Yeah, I'm maybe just a minute to elaborate on that, Kirk. I wonder if the audience, if you weren't aware, the voters of California passed Prop 64 and it legalized recreational cannabis, and this the delivery of cannabis to residences is a right that the state has given across the whole state, that you can have cannabis delivered and cities and counties cannot stop that. We're in an environment that the council has refined its cannabis regulations over time to nurture that industry. And I think what I'm hearing very loudly is is that there's a lot of thought around whether cannabis is good or bad, and I don't know that we're going to resolve that in this, but that we'll hopefully arrive at regulations that are as protective as possible in keeping youth physically away from these facilities, and then the rest is in the community's hands to educate and ensure that exposure and access to in the home is not happening. But I will stop and get off my soapbox there. I see a couple new hands. Oh, thank you for coming. Oh, Angel, I'm not sure if this is the same one, different name, but
Okay, I
We
can
can
hear you
hear
now.
you.
yay.
Okay, cool.
Welcome
So I
back.
just want to, hi. So I want to piggyback on what was said previously before the lady that just spoke. I don't agree with what she said. I don't agree with what you guys are doing. I just feel like the most ethical thing to do, like when it comes to children, people who are in religious communities, and like people who are in rehab or any of those communities, I feel like the most ethical thing for you guys to do is to keep these type of drugs, dispensaries, whatever it is, it's in the form of candies. You have brownies, you got all kind of forms of cannabis that children may be interested in. You have people who are going to rehab for doing drugs and they're not wanting to do these things, but if they're walking out to go to their car and the first thing they see is a dispensary every day or whatever, whenever they walk over. That's not a good way for them to be on recovery. It's also not a good thing as far as religious goes. I feel like religious communities have a respect level, and they, they don't want to smell weed outside of the churches. That's disrespectful. It's not ethical. Like I hear you guys, you want to have these dispensaries next to all these different places. And from what I'm hearing, I really think that you guys are doing it for money. I feel like you guys aren't putting them in the rich areas. They're not putting them in areas where you have firms at and where you have all these rich people located, but you're going to communities that are probably in the hood, probably places that, don't have the great looking environments. And that's what I've been seeing anyways. Also doing a research from years ago and still using data from that research for today, I don't think that's, the most accurate idea for you guys to do. I feel like you guys should evaluate the ethicality of your research. I feel like you guys should do more research, maybe with surveys of more than over, a little over 200 people. That's not enough people when there's a world full of, billions of people. So I feel like you guys, if this is something that you guys are wanting to do, you need to evaluate what you're doing. Maybe rethink it, because it's really not a good idea. There's enough dispensaries as there is. Like, I have GPS right now, and there's about 10 dispensaries in a 20-minute radius of where I'm at, and I'm in Sacramento near a hood. So if I go in Roseville, where I actually live at, and I Google a dispensary, I'm not going to see a dispensary for probably 25 to 30 minutes, and that's only what, one or two. There's really no type of dispensaries over there. I have to go to Natomas to get my weed if I want to smoke. I have siblings, I have little cousins, nieces, nephews, you know what I'm saying? Like, I have all these young youth that's around, and I feel like the most important thing for them is not to walk outside of school, outside of a daycare, and boom, they see somebody just came out of dispensary and bought weed. And then not only that, you'll have people who go into their cars or walk outside of the dispensaries and they're rolling up their weed, or they're eating their cookies and they're eating all this stuff in front of the kids or in front of the schools. Even though there's laws that state you're not supposed to do that, that doesn't determine what an individual actually does. And I've seen, from working in a dispensary, from being around, going to dispensaries, that's what people do. They don't follow, just because you guys have a rule that says, don't actually smoke your weed outside of they're going to do it. It happens all the time. And I just feel like the most ethical thing for you guys to do is to not put these in front of those type of communities. There's other places you can have dispensaries at. Those should be far away from those. And that's what my thought of it is. I will still, keep up with you guys and see what you guys are doing, because I am concerned. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Angel, for coming back and for your comments. I do want
Thank you for having me on here.
Yeah, I do want to point out to just for your information, the majority, almost all cannabis businesses are in Northeast and Southeast Sacramento. And the reason for that is that the regulations today are designed to make it the easiest place to locate.
Of course it is. That's actually very disrespectful.
So, well, I just want to make sure you clearly understand that.
I understand.
Okay.
And I'm trying to do something, as well as the other people on here, to prevent that from happening. The majority of people that I heard speak on here today are opposed of this thing that you guys are trying to pass. No one really agrees, except for that one lady that was on here, who honestly, I don't know, I don't know what her reason is for it, but I feel like that's just where I'm at with it. I just don't feel like I wanted to be around kids. That's my whole thing.
Thank you. Appreciate your time, and thanks for coming back again.
Thank you.
Okay, I see a couple folks who'd like to speak again. I'd like to first give Deja a chance. Deja R, you've been unmuted. You could click the microphone. on your screen. You're muted on mine. All right, Deja, I still see you're muted. While you're looking for the button, I do see a very easy question that I can answer. How soon will this recording be available? It will be provided on the project website that's been put into the chat. You can go there. I'd say give us till Friday, end of day. We need to work with our admin staff to get it uploaded to the website, but we were able to turn that around pretty quickly last time. So if you go to the project website within a couple days, you should see the recording. Deja, I'm sorry, I still can't hear you. You're muted on my screen. Look for the microphone icon, says audio. See if you can press that. While we're waiting, let's see. I think what I'm going to do, Deja, is just, if you can raise your hand. Again, I'm going to move on to our next speaker, Shira. You are up.
Hi.
Hello.
I just put mine in the Q&A, my comment. That's all. I just had a comment, so it's in there. I don't need to speak.
Very well.
Okay.
Your choice. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for joining today.
Thank you.
All right. Not Trevor. I think I learned that last time. I didn't catch your name. I apologize, but you're unmuted.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Yes, not Trevor. I'm sorry. My name is India.
Okay.
I just had one more, it's a question and a comment. And again, I know there's like a lot of energy surrounding this, and I do like the conversation and so many interesting perspectives. And I know it's probably challenging for you all because you're like trying to get the information out and you know, trying to make sure that we all understand clearly. So I do appreciate your patience again. My last question / comment is, so we are talking about potentially moving from is it called a conditional use permit or process to potentially a ministerial? Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
And so I think if you guys can just one more time elaborate the differences between the two, if you guys have time.
Yes, so a conditional use permit is a discretionary permit that is reviewed and approved either by the zoning administrator or the planning and design commission. Land uses that are subject to conditional use permits, they have a series of objective standards they have to meet, plus potentially ad hoc conditions in order for that land use to be kind of compatible with the location that's being proposed. Administrative permits are ministerial permits. They are reviewed and approved at the staff level. So there's no public hearing associated with it. You either meet the standards and get the permit, or you don't.
And
Okay.
I think maybe, Kurt, just to add on to your explanation of conditional use permits, the declared legislative purpose for that permit is that it is for land uses, a very small segment of overall land uses across the entire city that are known to have potential adverse effects on their neighboring properties or that area. They have impacts that are potentially problematic. So that permit is intended to, project by project, investigate that question. What we've found in those applications is that the literal business operations is not the subject of debate. It's the drug. It's the cannabis substance. So
Got it.
I'll leave.
Got it. And so thank you so much. That clarifies a lot for me. I appreciate you guys taking the time to say that. So the public voice, essentially. So I saw a lot of comments. Like I said, I've been following since last week, and there were a ton of comments online that kept talking about CUP or conditional use permit. We're losing the voice of the people, like all of this stuff. And so I just want to be clear, when you, or if we were to move to a ministerial or an administrative process, that means that the community would no longer have the opportunity to come out and speak. Is that correct?
Correct. There's
Or,
no public hearing.
okay. Okay. And I think that clarifies it. So that was my question. Okay, so now that I'm clear with the facts, I just want to give my comment. I'm sure that either way we go with those when it comes to permitting is extremely difficult, and I'm sure it's an extremely long process. I think my concern about moving away from the conditional use style is just because I think everything, in my opinion, is case by case. And so you'll have businesses come into an area and they may benefit one area based on how that community operates, and then it might be like a detriment to the other. But I think it is important to include the voice of the community of the surrounding area that that business may be coming to, so that, you know, we as people that might not live directly in that area have some type of understanding of what the community is feeling, what's the temperature of the community when it comes to those businesses kind of arriving in that area. So I do think it's a bit sensitive for us to move away from that. And not involve the people or the residents of that area. I just think that's a little bit concerning. Like, I know for me, I'm a Sacramento resident. I've been here for almost 10 years now, and I've lived in different areas. And so I've lived in 95838, more of the Del Paso Heights area. I'm now in North Natomas, 95835, definitely a different area, far different. They're vastly different. And I've seen a dispensary leave the area that I'm in now and then come to the area that I left. And so to kind of put that into perspective, I lived in not a good area, and then I moved to a good area. And we had a dispensary in the good area that ended up moving to the bad area that I left. And the effects of the dispensary being in both of those areas was vastly different on how it impacted the community. And so I think it would be important for us to still have that process, just because I think everything is case by case. I manage a business. I've been in retail for a long time. And so I am a rule stickler. I do like having clear, kind of concise things that people stick to. But I think that it's not necessary in these types of cases because they can greatly impact us. So I just wanted to put that out there. Like I said, I really appreciate it. I know this conversation is super challenging for a lot of people, but I just at least wanted to voice that I think that we should still have the conditional use process. So that's it for me. Thank you guys so much. And Trevor will not raise our hand anymore.
You're fine. We have ample time. Thank you again. Appreciate it. You coming out. This is why we're here. Our job is to be in the middle of it. All right. I do not see any more hands raised. And thank you to everyone. There are many questions in the Q&A. And let's see. I do
Some
see
comments as well.
Yeah, and some comments. Yeah. A lot of comments. Thank you very much for taking the time to put them there. Yep. There's quite a few about the cannabis being closer to other uses. I just want to emphasize that is not our recommendation. You can be closer today under the current rules. We are proposing a firm line you may not cross under our recommendation. I see. Apologize if I don't pronounce your name correctly. Trulinius? iPhone? I've clicked unmute.
Yes. Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Hi, I am so sorry. I just typed in that my hand has been raised and I didn't hear, no one was calling my name. I just wanted to speak on the areas that you're choosing, and like the young lady spoke and said that she felt 600 feet from children was enough. I think that's ludicrous. First of all, these cannabis clubs has bright, beautiful red and neon lights on them. So even if the footage is 600 feet, you've got these massive lights, going around the building and just beautiful. It attracts everyone, just like Christmas lights during the holiday seasons. It's just beautiful. So of course, those lights in themselves are going to attract children. Number two, being in the ministry, I've had a, drug and rehab ministry in my church where we would go 2 or 3 times a week to these places where the people are in remission from drugs, or are living in these facilities where they can stay for a year. They have to test every so often, you know, and I know that just to smell it, you know, I have sarcoidosis. So when I would take my son to work, sometimes that worked in the cannabis industry, he was a driver, you know, and I'd have to say, yeah, I even drove for him sometimes because you know, the long distances he had to drive, the way the people would look at the van, knowing that this is a cannabis van, it was dangerous for him to even, and then I'd ask him on several occasions, you did drop-offs, you did pickups. Yeah, I had $50,000 and these 2 cars chased me on the freeway. And, you know, this is a dangerous business. It's a lot of money in it, which is why the government wanted to make it legal in the first place, because the drug dealers were making all the money. So they wanted to get the taxes off of it, which they did that. Okay, but now you're putting them in areas where people are more vulnerable. You have people that's trying to detach from drugs, whether it's for medicinal purposes or not, you know, and seeing what is done to communities, seeing what is done to children, the vaping pens, they have these flavors that attract children, strawberry, apple, you know, you say that it's not, and we're trying to protect children, but yet you're luring them and you're putting them in areas like the young lady just spoke that lives in Roseville. You know, there's no cannabis stores, there's no liquor stores in some of those areas, in the, you know, more richer neighborhoods. Why would you even consider putting it where the people are more vulnerable? And then people that are on probation. I worked for DMV for 27 years. People lost their driver's licenses because they tested positive for drugs, which included marijuana, and they lost their livelihood. So I don't think that having these cannabis clubs in the areas of neighborhoods, schools, 600 feet is not enough. The lights themselves will attract children and people that are vulnerable. So I don't agree with you, and I will be following up with the progress. And I definitely agree with the lady that spoke on the data that you're using is over 4 years old. It's been a lot of apartments, low income apartments, people that are most vulnerable. So I think that you guys should do a new survey, and you should not take it out of the hands of the people that own homes, that are renting in these high crime areas. And that's my comment.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time and for offering those. That's what we're here for today. I appreciate it. All right, I don't see any more hands raised. We're at 12:20. We've been at it for almost 2 hours. Thank you everyone who's stuck around. Hopefully you're getting the info that you came for. Not, you're welcome to reach out to our website, sign up for updates. Kirk's contact info is there. Follow up with you one-on-one if you prefer. All right, last call. Anyone else would like to offer any comments, please raise your hand. All right, I'm not seeing any hands raised. Kirk,
What's that?
you wanna wrap this up for us?
Yeah, would like to thank everyone for coming out, participating. This was definitely, I think, one of the more robust question and answer periods we've had throughout the community engagement phase. So really appreciate all the input that everyone provided. Again, as a reminder, sign up for the email notification list. When we anticipate a public meeting for this project, we will notify that list.
All right. Thank you, Kirk. And thank you everyone for your time. Do really appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and your week. Take care. See you next time.